And so for this YouTube channel, you'll see that all of the different subcommittees and the meetings that we have are uploaded onto this channel, as well as the presentations from last week, if you missed them, from Chuck Marone. We have the housing trap, which was the one over the noon hour, and then the curbside chat that was later on in the evening. Curbside chat a little bit longer, a little bit more material in there, but definitely some overlap between the two. So if you want to check those out, that's where they're located. All right. Some of that housekeeping all done. I guess at this point in time, what I'll do is I'll just hand it over to Jim if you want to go ahead and start screen sharing and kind of walk us through that project.
Right. As first I'll start with just a orientation to the site area. All of the properties outlined in the bold yellow are currently owned by Winona State University and or our foundation. There's a couple of parcels that are still under the ownership of the foundation. So this is all of the property that we are using at this point for planning the field house. The Quick Trip, Gordy's, Wonderlic Insurance over here, and a couple of private residences. We planned the facility using only our property and assuming that we didn't have a need to acquire anything else. The other factor in play is the railroad right of way. We currently lease both sides of the tracks, basically just for building and drive access, as the track right away goes right to right to our baseball fence and to our grandstands for the football field. So in order to maintain our properties, we lease access space from the railroad. Next is just the current zoning of the property. And Carlos, please jump in if I am incorrect. But generally the property is this is all R2, is that correct? And then R1 down by the lake?
That's correct.
And then there's a small business zoning district over here on Huff Street. So right now the area is zoned R2, and there's an overlay zoning district that allows the university to do some expanded things that wouldn't be allowed in a basic R2 district. So one of the things that we'll need to talk about for transformative projects is there is a need to redefine some of the zoning in order to make this project more compatible with the zoning. What I'm going to show you is what is called a pre-design in the Minnesota state jargon. And I'm going to show you a bunch of images and plans for the building that are going to look very final and very definitive. But a pre-design's purpose is to assess the needs of the university, what programs we need to provide spaces for, and then establish a budget so that we can do fundraising or ask for bonding and those types of things. The only reason the project looks so detailed is we need to do that to come up with a reasonable cost, to test fit the feasibility on the site. Does it actually fit there? And then also allow our foundation to do fundraising. So I don't want anybody to look at these diagrams and say, the project is completely designed, Winona State's going to build exactly that and nothing can be changed. So these are programmatic images. So I don't want anybody to leave here saying Winona State's done with this project and it's going to look exactly like the things I show you. So here is an aerial view of the site. Our current football field, Quick Trip, and Gordy's, and we managed to fit a indoor track, field house, and all of the programmatic spaces we need between the current football field and the back of the Quick Trip Gordy's property. This does assume that the city would vacate Winona Street to allow us to build over the top of it. And that street vacation has not been completed yet, so that'd be something that would have to happen in order to build this facility. Back to this first slide. So as I mentioned before, we did an intensive study of the athletics and recreational needs of our student programs in 2016. And that was the basis for this project, we recognized that it could not be funded all in one fundraising effort, so we did design it to be built in phases. The program for the project would be practice space for football, soccer, baseball, softball, track and field, cross country, and golf. Essentially all of our outdoor sports. Currently, softball is using city properties for their practice. Our track and field program used to practice indoors at St. Mary's. We no longer can do that. And our outdoor season is at Paul Giel Field. Our cross-country folks run wherever they can find places to run around town. And our golf folks are out at one of the golf courses, and they do their indoor practice in some old racquetball courts on campus. The project was also designed to be an NCAA competition venue for track and field so that we could host events, something we can't do now. Also, along with all the athletics use, we also program space for student recreation, as well as academic use for our physical education teachers and our outdoor rec folks and the majors that deal with recreation and athletic activities. And we did also consider, we have quite a few people that currently use our spaces, both high school and community events, whether it be Legion baseball or Cotter for football. So we get quite a bit of community use. So we did consider that in the program of the building. In 2022 dollars, the project was about 80 million. So we can just escalate that from there. Footprint of what the floor plan could look like. This was designed around a 300-meter track. That's a fairly unique track size. Official indoor track is a 200-meter track. Official outdoor track is a 300-meter track. This allows additional activities for track and field that you can't do in the shorter banked 200-meter track. The 300-meter track does not have to have banked corners, so you can have a flat floor, which makes the space more usable. And then all of the locker rooms and training facilities for those athletic sports that I named earlier would be in this space. We also did layouts to see what trade shows and concerts, those types of things would fit in here. This building was designed to hold 5,000 spectators plus the athletes and the performers. Currently, our football field holds 3,000. So we felt 5,000 was about the right number of people to have in the building. Second floor would be office space and additional training space for our coaches and athletes. And then on the back side here next to the stadium would be banquet facilities that would be available for athletic events, fundraising events, community events. We felt there'd be a need to have just some more large event space for our campus and our community. And then the third floor is mostly mechanical space, and then a few more support and office spaces on the third floor. Some renderings of what the building could look like. And one of the considerations, we can't depress the building because of the water level here in this area. Building this large of a facility in a lot of communities, they'd probably depress it a couple of floors to keep the scale of the building down. So this is a very large structure. You can see it's pushed tight up against the back of these pieces of property. If there's a way that we could acquire and these other properties and offer them spaces to relocate their businesses, the building could have additional program and fit more comfortably on the site. We did plan for a loading zone and some parking along Sarnia, so that if there is a trade show and they need to bring in semi trucks, there's a place for the trucks to back in and load and unload here without blocking the street. Another view from the track side. We do have this pedestrian ramp that comes out of the tunnel from under the tracks. So there is a little cutout in the site that we can't build on right there unless we somehow bring that ramp indoors. View from the stadium side. This third floor area would also become private boxes for football games. So our alumni and donors could view the football game from up here in the private boxes. Just a couple of images. So phase one essentially would be just the field house and the necessary restrooms and support spaces for the field house. So that would be the first effort on the project, would be really just a large indoor space for us to start using. The second phase would add the athletic locker rooms and athletic support facilities to the building. And then the last phase would add the public convention and conferencing space to the building. And then just to add into the discussion, just as the city of Winona is doing a comprehensive plan at this point in time, so is Winona State. So we're running essentially a parallel planning process, and this is just a diagram of some of our current planning ideas. And we are planning for this zone to be field house and recreation spaces. And this is in development, so we're continuing to look at this. Another big push that Winona State is undertaking with our planning is to become more sustainable. And as part of that, we are mapping out land for solar and land for stormwater management. And the area on top of where this field house would go is planned to be a very large energy resource for us in both PV solar production and a place where we can do a ground source heat pump, also known as geothermal wells, which eventually will allow us to no longer burn fossil fuels at our central plant. So that's another one of the big ideas here. There's probably enough land here to do about a I don't know if I get the giga or megas right, but essentially the same size solar field that you see on solar gardens out in the countryside, and would provide a substantial amount of electricity for the university. We are currently doing solar panels over this parking lot and on top of the IWC and on top of McCowan Gym. This area that we're building right now is going to be one megawatt of solar. So this would more than double our current solar capacity. And then just points of discussion of what partnership opportunities would be valuable in this project. One I think we've talked about before is a relocation of the baseball field. Our current baseball field does not meet NCAA dimensions. It's too small and from home plate to backstop, and the east outfield is too short, and there's some other things that are not up to the specs for an NCAA facility. So we do need more land than we currently have to have an appropriately sized ball field. The other one is there's a maze of public utilities running underneath this site. Did our screen change? So the city was kind enough to give us their utility plans that we can put into our own GIS site. And as you can see in this site area, there's some very significant utilities running under the site, including, I think this is a 20-inch or bigger water main that runs down Winona Street. So we would have to work with the city to find a way to relocate these utilities to build the project. As I mentioned before, zoning accommodations are something that could be helped in the new comp plan. Parking facilities, always a point of discussion. Is there a way that we can partner on parking facilities? Our current athletic and sports events essentially attract local folks to see the games, and the local folks and students have very good knowledge of the neighborhoods and ways to park their cars and get into the games, and really do not cause much disruption in the community when we have large events. But if this moves to be a event center that attracts out of town people, then how we handle those cars and how we park those folks would have another dimension to them, and might even need structured parking to accommodate all of them. As I mentioned before, if there's a way that the remaining parcels on this multi-block area could be acquired, and we can work with the local businesses to find a place to relocate. The project could be expanded and would have a lot of other design opportunities and not have to be shoehorned in the site that it's in. Another area is obviously operating and programming a facility of this size takes quite a bit of human effort and money. So some joint operations agreement for operation and programming could help the facility be more financially viable. And then finally, financing. $80 million is a lot for any entity to take on. And are there ways that we could partner on financing? Our current financing strategy is a combination of student fees. That's how we built our current rec center, the IWC, is the students agreed to assess themselves a fee for a certain number of years to help pay for that student recreation center. That bond on that project will be completed in several years, and we would likely ask the students to then take that fee and apply it to this field house, as it will be used for student rec and other academic pursuits. And then the bulk of the money would be private fundraising. As everybody's familiar with the current legislative climate, the opportunity to get this bonded through the legislature is about zero, because they bond academic buildings only at this point, so we would have to do private fundraising. So I'll stop there. Are there any other questions or things that folks would want to know?
Not seeing anything here. Jim, why don't you go ahead and proceed?
Hey, Carlos, you had a couple of questions you sent. Should we kind of run down those as points of discussion?
Sure, if you'd like to go through those a little bit, that would be great.
Okay. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the scope of the project. It's currently fits within the current property that we have, that Winona State owns. I guess just general thoughts of expanding as a transformative project into this entire 4-block area versus the space that it's currently shoehorned in. If the program would call for a bigger building or would call for structured parking or other amenities on the site, what are the thoughts of this taking up more land than it currently does?
And Jim, maybe you could talk about too, like if it were to incorporate a larger area, is that something too where the baseball field could be incorporated into those 4 blocks, or would it still have to move in that scenario?
That would take some further study. The baseball field is too short in the east-west dimension. It's long enough in the north-south dimension. And with the railroad owning property on this corner and the ramp on this corner, the baseball field could fit right in the middle. So then the question is there enough space left for the rest of the project? Another twist to the project is further discussion since this was done is a 200-meter track would be sufficient for our athletic teams to use. And a 200-meter track is about the same size as a football field. So the track could actually be run north-south inside the building and take up about as much space as a football field. So it could be a much smaller track inside the building. But I think ultimately with parking resources and other demands, the baseball field would likely need to be relocated.
Got it. Thank you.
And Jim, related to that and impacts on the surrounding neighborhood, when we talk about business relocation, movement of other buildings here, are there, so business relocation on the western side, on the eastern side, are there any other elements of Winona State's property that would need to be facilitated elsewhere aside from the baseball stadium?
No, I mean, we have our landscape and grounds yard here. And we have a parking resource on the corner of Sarnia and Main. So if we would expand to the east, we would need to find a way to replace the parking resource and relocate our grounds yard. Both of those are fairly flexible and I think could be absorbed with low impact on the surrounding area. We have a large parking resource here at Sarnia and Huff Street. Is that a land swap opportunity to do other things? Does it become structured parking? Does it just remain as it is something to be discussed. We did have discussions with Quick Trip at one point. They're very interested in buying this parking lot from us to do an expanded Quick Trip. That hit neighborhood opposition almost immediately, and we decided to drop the discussion. But would there be a potential to acquire property on the other side of Huff Street, which is adjacent to the business district? And could these property owners be accommodated on the other side of the street through some negotiations with the property owners?
And
So,
for your,
go ahead.
and for your reference, I was going to move on to streetscape. So if you had another part related to land use of specific sites, sorry.
No, just say that anytime there's property acquisition, it becomes a sensitive topic. So, and we're aware that we can't just assume that we're going to acquire additional property to do things. That's why we kept within our own footprint.
Just out of curiosity, do you know the level of interest those businesses on the west side to have of relocating?
Quick Trip does want to expand their facility at this site. It's a very successful facility. They have potential to have much more business there than their current facility can allow them to do. So they would like to be in this neighborhood and they'd like to have space for a bigger facility. So I think they would be open to any discussions. The Gordys, I don't know where they're at with their business. We have had intermittent discussions with them over time about when they're ready to sell. They'd like to talk to us about selling their property. So I think there's willingness there. We haven't really talked to Wonderlick or any of the residents on the east side of our property in any recent time about acquisition.
And Jim, there was just a question related to the proposal by Quick Trip to utilize the Lincoln lot, and for that to happen, there would need to be a couple of different things that would happen in terms of city approvals. So one of those things would be a comprehensive plan change, and another one would be rezoning. And as you mentioned, we had a community meeting, or we had kind of a meeting to talk about, what that would look like. And the main opposition to that just had to do with, I think the layout of the Quick Trip, the interaction with the neighborhood that is right immediately adjacent to it. And really just the new use on the existing lot that used to be, we call it the Lincoln lot. It was a Lincoln Elementary School. So moving further, if anything like that were to happen in the future, again, it would need some type of comprehensive plan adjustment as well as zoning. And I think one thing that would be particularly important if something like that were to happen on this site, or if anything in the future does happen with that Lincoln lot, besides just the at-grade parking, is of course the interaction with whatever use goes there and the immediate surrounding neighborhood. Parking, streetscape, circulation, hours of operation. all those things are a consideration, especially when you're taking a look at what is a pretty quiet space right now in terms of use outside of being used for parking, and looking at a more intense use in the future. So that was just some of the discussion related to the proposal for Quick Trip to purchase that piece of property. But in the future, that is kind of a crucial gateway into the city here. And so we would see Huff Street as being very important, not only for entrance into the city overall, but also kind of, and I think you've seen this in the past as well, but the entrance to kind of the university area as well. And I think that we'll talk a little bit about that in our transportation subcommittee, in terms of the importance of Huff Street, it being a local street, and the ability for us to make some connections among a number of community resources, north-south, utilizing Huff Street. So that's just something I wanted to say.
Yeah, and in that discussion, I have to compliment Quick Trip that their first inclination in what they did is they went to the neighborhood first before they went through any other public process. And when they found that the neighborhood was not accepting of the change of use there, they really didn't push it any further. So I do give them credit for being very sensitive and concerned about the neighbors. So Luke, you had some streetscape things?
Yeah, so discussing I would like this committee to kind of think back to our last conversation about the Riverway Trail connection plan, or development of a plan in that regard. And to Carlos's point as well, and Huff Street being kind of a primary north-south, and Main Street also being a primary north-south, connecting the lakes and the river. And we know from past planning efforts with Park and Recreation and with our Complete Streets policy that we'd be eyeing maybe more of a linear parkway feel for these types of corridors. And I'm seeing, every time you're talking about here, I'm seeing a real opportunity to maybe turn things or have a broader conversation. And I'd like the committee to maybe give some thoughts here of what does everything south of here look like? Jim, you have loading facilities and parking along Sarnia Street there. Does this become more of an at-grade type situation rather than a clear differentiation between traffic and where pedestrians would be walking, a shared street situation? Is it more of a park-like situation? What are your thoughts as a committee related to how you would feel this site should be interacting with the neighborhood, essentially?
This might be taking a big step back from that, but I'm curious what we're thinking about, for events here, for what would be happening here that the community would be interacting with the space for. So I'd love to hear just even ideas or brainstorms, or especially if there are things that people see that this would serve that currently can't come to Winona. I'm especially interested in that, but I think that would help me kind of think about those kind of questions better.
And Jim, could you touch on, so the fourth phase, if there were that fourth phase that you mentioned, what type of kind of more event facilities were included as part of this plan?
My computer's slow here. Hang on a second. I'm just gonna move onto the screen here if my computer lets me. There we go. So as part of the discussion and study of the space, we did look at what it would be to lay out other events in the space. So here shows a 5,000 seat concert. It would be suitable for that with the loading bay here off street. We bumped in off Sarnia Street, so the load in load out could happen right here on the stage end. Another way you could set up the space for another 5,000 seat type event. This would be a layout where a trade show or a trade booth would be in here. And this layout was done so we could keep people off the turf and they'd all be in hard surface areas. So we could have 200 plus trade booths in the space. So the things that would happen in a facility like this would be, you know, is there, it's the big question to ask. If we had a space that could hold 2,000 people in a high quality event venue, are there promoters and are there people that would want to use a space and draw the crowd? Is there an infrastructure in town to program and promote trade shows and other convention type activity? Along with the main floor, there's also numerous meeting rooms and conference rooms that are planned to be part of this facility. So if you did have a larger event, you could do breakout type activities like people would see at other event venues. So that is a question to be thought about and asked is there even a need for those large types of events or a desire to have those large events in town? Obviously, we have them with athletics, and we would be able to host more tournaments and those types of things with this type of facility. So there'd be more activity during the academic year and possibly during the summer with athletic events that are a larger scale than we currently have.
Thanks, Jim. That helps definitely. Did you have any other slides that you wanted to move through?
Nope.
Yeah, Sadie does have a couple of questions here. Hold on one second. So Sadie's questions have to do with out-of-town visitors envisioned to be attracted to WSU athletics. Can you, Jim, maybe touch on people that use the facility and out-of-town visitors that come to the games now versus what might happen into the future with a project like this?
Our current facilities allow games. So whenever we have a sporting event, it's us and the visiting team. And so the intensity of visitors is, you know, friends and family of the visiting team, and obviously teams that are closer to Winona have more fans than say somebody from Fargo or out in North Dakota somewhere. So there's a fairly limited amount of people that will come. You know, it's the visiting team. With a larger facility and more amenities, we would look to be hosting tournament activities. And so there you would have half a dozen teams competing over a weekend at a tournament. And in that situation, there would be a need within the community for lodging for these teams. They'd need to find restaurants and other places to go, you know, between games and recreation activities to participate during the tournament period. On a community basis, it's a very similar thing, is that we have high schools playing, we have other community groups like Legion and stuff that are using our facilities, but they're not doing tournaments. They're generally just doing games. So they don't draw nearly the number of people as you would if you have more of a tournament venue.
Got it. Thank you. And I think that also answers some of the other questions that Sadie posted as well, related to, you know, cost for entrance, and then, you know, city revenues or revenues that might come into local businesses. You know, if you have tournaments like that, like you said, people need a place to stay, people need places to eat, are going to go patronize other local businesses. So definitely. Thank you. Any other questions at this point in time?
Has there been any discussion with the Minnesota College Southeast about doing something similar to this on their property?
They're currently the location for the relocation of the baseball field. And there has been discussions with them ongoing about developing a sports venue on their site related to the baseball field. Potential of relocating other support facilities that go with the baseball field to activate the space over there. We currently play rugby on their site, so there has been discussion that direction. We do partner on several other activities where, for example, their students live in our res halls if they need a place to live. So we would definitely have discussions with them of how this facility could provide recreation facilities for their students. I believe their students also are available to get memberships and use our student rec center. So there are definitely opportunities how we could support their students and staff with this facility as well. I don't know if they have sufficient land for something like this, if it was to be located on their land. That I'm not sure of.
One other question too, Jim, that I had, and I think I emailed this to you previously too, but just if you could talk a little bit about some direct benefits to the community from this project in terms of, people being able to use the facility, how it would interact with the immediate neighborhood. I think that those are some of the important considerations that we would list in the comprehensive plan, that those are things that need to be talked about. Not only how people use the facility, but also how the facility itself, interacts architecturally with the street and the adjacent neighborhood as well. Could you provide some comments on those as well?
Well, the design of the facility will have to have, great sensitivity to what particularly the Sarnia Street face looks like. This is a large facility. It's 70 foot tall to at the center of the roof, which is a significantly tall building. So how the building is massed and the materials used along the Sarnia Street particularly will have to be a strong design exercise to get something that feels good to the neighborhood. The Huff Street side, depending on whether or not the current service stations stay there, I could see that side of the site and the Main Street side of the site to have very pedestrian friendly, possibly mixed use even activities could be bookending this site so that it would have a much better interface with the streets on both the east and the west if it was to be expanded to touch those streets. So I won't try to soften the fact that it's a very large structure that is sitting between the university and the residential community. The height of this building would be probably similar to the res halls that are there along the railroad tracks, just for scale. But those residence halls have a buffer of the tracks and other WSU facilities before they touch the neighborhood, so there's less impact there. The other consideration would be how do we deal with event parking on a day-to-day basis for day-to-day university use and community use. The current parking resources and street parking, I think, can easily accommodate what's needed. But if we do get to tournament situations, trade show situations, we'll have to work on a broader scale on how do we deal with vehicles. And this could be a situation where we do satellite parking. We don't have to do all of it here in the neighborhood. We could do a satellite parking in a shuttle bus, or satellite parking and a greenway where you can walk to the site. To assume that you have to stuff all of the vehicles adjacent to the building, I think would be a wrong way to look at it from that standpoint.
Definitely. And one last question for me, at least. Could you talk a little bit more about the location for this facility? I mean, obviously, it's adjacent to the campus. It's on land, or it utilizes land that is pretty much all owned by the university at this point in time. Can you provide any additional background on the location of this property here, and the importance of the facility in terms of this location versus another location, for instance?
I think that the primary reason for this location is it is property the university currently owns and controls. The university as a whole is very sensitive to our impact on the city. And we think very seriously and give very serious consideration to any time we acquire property. So we didn't feel it definitely was not our first choice or first idea to go acquire additional property in the city to build this. So it made the most sense to us as far as a city partner to not take up 3 blocks somewhere else in the city with a facility like this. And then just the adjacency with the tunnels we have under the railroad tracks, the existing sports facility of our stadium, having it walkable and easily accessible to our students, to our student athletes and our students for recreation, just made a whole lot of sense. Particularly from the student recreation standpoint, if you want to go work out between classes, the students wouldn't be able to use it if they had to hop in their car. You know, athletes getting in a vehicle and going off to practice is different than a student who's on their lunch hour going to work out in the weight room. So to keep it adjacent and walkable from our campus is also very important from our student service standpoint.
Definitely. Thank you very much. I'm out of questions for now. Does anybody else have anything more for Jim?
Yeah. Winona State's proposed projects in that neighborhood have been met with, let us say, kindly less than positive enthusiasm. What reaction have you gotten so far to putting up this building in that spot from the folks?
We have not publicly announced the project. A lot of people know about it. You probably have seen more of the project than most others in the community. We do not have the funds for it now. It has been showing up in our planning processes for about 10 years. So, you know, we haven't been secret about it, but until we have the ability to fund it and build it, we haven't taken it out to the community because there's no reason in creating a furor over something that may be 20 years down the road. So at this point in time, we do not have a start of construction date because we do not have money to build it. This is just a planning exercise at this point. Should it become closer to reality and we have money identified to build it, then we would take it out to the community and have, you know, full community participation with it. But I guess we didn't want to cause alarm or cause any controversy at this point in time because it is just a planning exercise.
Okay. So I've been trying to think about in coming today to talk, like there is a sense that the original discussion and brainstorming was around something that would be, there was this sandwiching of ideas of a WSU field house with a convention center, event center, even a winter garden idea, maybe like Como has up in St. Paul. And so to me, I'm an employee of Winona State University as well, and this seems like a Winona State project, a large transformative project for Winona State, but it doesn't seem like something that is particularly transformative for the city of Winona, besides some of the concerns for the neighborhood and utilities and parking and things like that. I'm having trouble thinking like why this committee should kind of back or endorse this, just because it doesn't seem like it's a city specific project. Obviously, as an employee of Winona State, I understand that Winona State has a huge impact on the city and plays an important role in the city. And so I don't want to downplay the role of Winona State in the broader impact of the community. The other thing that is, and I think maybe Sadie's questions were getting at this, I don't want to speak for them, but is that even in the plan that Jim presented, the top 3 bullet points were about student athletes, athletic competitions, student athletic usage and instruction, and then maybe a peripheral use by the community. And so I think if the community was going to invest the time and funding into literally building this, it would need more. It reminds me of when the US Bank Stadium was proposed in Minneapolis when I was living there. And you had like a wealthy, sports team owners saying, we need money from the state, we need money from the city. And it will be a stadium for the public. And they didn't want to build a roof on it, which meant that the public couldn't use it for most of the year. And so Dayton at the time said you have to put a roof on it so at least we can have concerts there and things like that. And in the time that I lived there after it was built, and since then, like, it's a stadium that is used by the Vikings and by Vikings fans and players and for some concerts and events, but the community is mostly disrupted by its construction and its existence, and is continuing to pay for it. And so I would rather see $80 million of Winona State's budget as a university go to hiring faculty, building new dorms with air conditioners, things like that. And I would rather see our city do transformative projects like affordable housing, mental health services, community childcare, and things like that. So that's my 2 cents.
And yeah, in response to that, this is, as shown today on this presentation, it is a Winona State centered project. It was intended to be paid for as student fees, fundraising by Winona State Foundation and other Winona State funds. Where it could become transformative is if it does become a partnership and it does start to incorporate other city needs. That's the opportunity that this plan doesn't show. This is very Winona State specific, and I would agree to be a transformative project for the city. It needs to be, there's more that this project could be to be transformative, and that's where the discussion of a partnership, are there other city needs that a larger, different development could provide. So yeah, as presented, it is a Winona State specific project. Is there interest in the community in creating more and making it more of a community asset and not just solely Winona State? I think that's the question. And if there's not community interest, then it will stay a Winona State project.
To turn that into a question, what about this project do you see community partnership being able to facilitate or use it as a catalyst for that type of community change?
Yeah,
What would you like to see out of it?
Yeah, I would throw that out to the community because, we know what Winona State needs. We'd like to hear from the community, from this group. Are there other needs that could be added to this project to make it transformative?
For me, the idea of having concerts, larger concerts or interesting trade shows is absolutely appealing, especially in a facility, that I could walk to from downtown that, would hopefully be accessible to a lot of people, by walking or by bike. And so, if that's a possibility, to me, that's massively appealing. And I guess this kind of brings me back to my question. As a new resident, I don't really know this well, what is that potential? Are there trade shows that have skipped over us before, or, concerts that wanted to come to Winona but couldn't find a space large enough? Is there already sort of a demonstrated need like with the bike path that we've, or trail that we've been talking about, it's hard to get from, the art museum to downtown, without a car. That to me is a real clear need. This, I don't quite see it as much as, the daydream is super appealing to me. So I'd love to ask again if anybody has any insight on that.
I can just say from a city perspective, and one thing that was in the existing 2007 comprehensive plan is a performing center, performing arts center, and a conference center type of thing, and that is one thing that we run into in terms of the ability for our city to hold large conference style events. I just think about, for instance, the State Planning Association. The reason that they can't have a conference in Winona is because we don't have one facility that can accommodate that many people coming from out of town. St. Cloud has it, Rochester has it, Duluth has it. And there's one up in Alexandria that does kind of a decent job, sort of. It's actually a resort, but it's kind of weird. But in any case, they have facilities that accommodate something like that. And, that's something that I think has come up a number of times and was in the last comprehensive plan as, that type of larger facility is something that could be used into the future. It's just the hard thing goes into programming it, the funding needed to continue its upkeep and to actually make it sustainable. That's the difficulty with something like that.
To add to that a little bit, it's also the small things. One of the things that came up during our community services and institutions conversations earlier this week was the need for people to have a space to go in winter for simple things like just walking around indoors. The mall isn't very big. And so they brought that up and specifically called out, we need an event or a space to be able to do those types of small activities indoors. And right now, what WSU is showing is some of that type of space where you could kind of have that conference room space or an upstairs indoor space for a multitude of different uses, I imagine, for a rentable fee. But also, I imagine that there's a room for there to be collaboration for, say, somebody who wants to start a mall walkers type series and work with WSU to get that organized. So having a facility does create that type of opportunity. And to answer your question, Ethan, frankly, we don't know. We probably do have a study dating back 15 years ago, but we don't know what that means for 2024, 2020, or 2045, or anything beyond that either. So I think that's a good point.
I would just add that Visit Winona likely has some of that data as well. I've certainly heard staff at Visit Winona say to us that, they get inquiries about conference and even smaller scale events. And I think it's important, though, for us, and Jim, not to put you on the spot, but I think it's an important piece that we've kind of circled around, everybody's at least danced around, is, the Minnesota Park and Recreation Association would love to have a conference here in Winona. We don't have a space, it's not big enough. They would like to hold it the last weekend in September. My question for the university is this building open in the end of September, or is it football, cross country, golf, tournament? And is it really truly open for the community during X week? Or because student fees are involved, it's students first, then the athletic department, then general student body. And where does the timing fit for the community as well? I think that's a question that we need, or I think we should be asking. So yes, we may need conferences, but again, because it's student fee based and other university concerns, how likely is it schedulable and open?
Yeah, if it is funded solely with Winona State University resources, university state resources would have priority use. And so the challenge for this project is there a a joint operation agreement, a financing agreement, a way that we can have it as a partnership facility that has shared management and shared priorities. The fiduciary responsibility of the university would be to focus their funds towards their students. So there'd have to be other fiduciary responsibilities in the joint powers or operations agreement that allows shared priorities. It wouldn't be right for the university to build a community center with student fees and not give students priority use. That's, I think people would question us quite highly if that was, if we did that. So, and again, I think that's where this becomes transformative. Is there identified community need, and is there a community will to form a partnership to make this a joint use facility and have more than just the university skin in the game?
Okay.
And those things like Luke had mentioned, very, very much so, it'd be great to have casual community use of this space as a community asset. And that would require a community partnership of some sort.
Got it. Thank you, Jim. All right. We have come up on our 1 hour here. We are at 2:30. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of sum up our discussion for today. And we'll look at, before we adjourn here, seeing if we can schedule our next meeting time for July. And we are here on the 29th, Wednesday. 2 weeks out would be the 13th. 3 weeks out would be the 20th in July. Not sure if either one of those would be better for those who are in attendance here. Got it. Okay, we will go for, oh, I'm sorry, hold on 1 second here. Let's see who's, the 20th is, okay. Any objections to the 20th if we did the 20th? Okay. Sure can.
Walking away from this meeting, I am unclear if this project is on our list or what that next step is.
Sure. So what I would plan to do is to put together just a summary document of our discussion today and some of the considerations, and then it can be up to the subcommittee whether you like to include it or not, and we can make that decision at a future date. Okay. So in terms, yep, exactly. So for next time, in terms of topics, the three that were most highly voted on last time that we took a look at this was housing, incubator space, and then also the community center, police and fire project. So one of those three is what we'd be looking at for the next meeting. We do have a housing subcommittee meeting next week. And should that committee kind of focus in on maybe a particular project or geographic area, I would be interested in focusing our next discussion on housing. So just we'll keep you in the loop. So it's going to be one of those three. And if it's not housing, I would probably go to incubator space since that was the highest rated one. And then last but not least would be the community center fire police project for discussion. So. All right, I think we have decided on the 20th and we'll see you then at 1:30. Otherwise, thanks again, everybody, for attending. And thank you so much, Jim, for your presentation and answering of questions today. All right, have a good one.